There was no press conference afterward, no breaking news alert, no televised outrage. But within hours, something had shifted in ways that nobody could have predicted. It started online, the way these things do now. A single image, the spreadsheet Jasmine had projected on the wall. 5 years of numbers, 5 red circles, one name, G.J. Rollin. Under it, a simple caption, $793 million. No oversight, no voice. Then the hashtag started. Invisible cuts. Indirect code. Jasmine saw the line. But this wasn't your typical social media outrage cycle. This wasn't people getting mad for 24 hours and then moving on to the next thing. This was different. This was documentation. This was proof. Within a day, former recipients of the Disability Assistance Direct Grant Program began sharing their stories. Some pulled out old denial letters, the ones they kept in dusty folders, but never really looked at again because it hurt too much to remember. Some uploaded voicemails they had saved, messages from caseworkers explaining that funds were no longer available, voices apologizing but saying, there's nothing else we can do. Others just wrote, now I know why they stopped answering. Nobody was screaming. Nobody was rioting. But something much more powerful happened. People paid attention. A nonprofit law group in Washington, D.C. filed a formal request to audit every welfare-related budget reallocation over the last decade. Another filed a petition demanding congressional testimony from the Office of Management and Budget. By the end of the week, a young federal investigator, just 28 years old, posted on X, I used to think numbers were dry, just ink on paper, but today I saw them tell a story. And finally, someone listened. That post was shared 17,000 times, not because it was loud, but because it was true. And the kind of truth that gets hidden on purpose has a way of echoing louder than anything else. Jasmine didn't go viral because she yelled. She didn't trend because she made a fiery speech. She went viral because she held up a document and let it flicker on a screen. Because she read what others ignored. Because she asked what others were too afraid to ask. Because she saw not just the numbers, but the people behind them. And now, across the country, those people were responding. Not with rage, not with blame, but with a quiet, simple message. We were waiting for someone to notice. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She didn't beg for anyone to care. Jasmine Crockett just closed the folder in front of her. She didn't say another word. She didn't need to. The numbers had already spoken. Behind her, the projector was still glowing, line by line, adjustment by adjustment, authorization by authorization. Each one now visible, each one undeniable. And the people who signed those lines didn't deny them. They didn't defend them. They didn't even look at them. Because when the truth finally comes quietly, in the form of a spreadsheet and a signature and a silent code across public records, there's nowhere left to hide. Across the room, an older man in a flannel shirt, clearly not part of the official staff, slowly stood up from the back row. His voice was soft, but it echoed in the chamber. My daughter lost her therapy last year. I thought it was just a system glitch. Today I know someone signed it away. Nobody replied. Not the clerk, not the advisors, not the row of silent agency heads lined up along the wall. Because what do you say when the paper trail leads back to your own pen? Jasmine unplugged her laptop, removed the HDMI cable, and folded her documents one by one. No press scrum, no final statement, just a quiet exit and a digital wave moving faster than any news camera could ever capture. Invisible cuts was trending by midnight. Jasmine saw. The line was too, and for once, there was no counter-narrative, no smear campaign, no pundits trying to reframe the story. Because data doesn't shout. It doesn't spin. It doesn't need to convince you. It just shows up, exactly the way she did. And this time, it didn't matter that she stayed calm, that she didn't raise her voice, that she didn't speak in anger, because the truth was loud enough all on its own. They told her she was emotional, but when the facts were laid out for everyone to see, nobody in that room had anything left to say. That night, the emails started flooding in. Staffers who had been in the room, families who had seen the post online, veterans who recognized the program name on their denial letters. A mother from Ohio wrote, "I kept calling for months, asking why the home nurse stopped coming for my son. They said it was budget cuts. I thought it was just the state being the state. But now I see your document, and I see the name on it, and I see the date, and I know it was a person." A veteran from Texas sent a message. "They told me to reapply. I did, 3 times. I stopped when I realized I was using the last of my good days to fill out forms they were never going to read. If I had known they'd decided in a quiet room to stop helping me, I would have spent that time with my grandson." A caseworker from Michigan wrote, "I quit last year. I couldn't take it anymore, telling families, maybe next year, while knowing in my gut that wasn't true. I always thought it was above my pay grade to ask why, but I just saw your slides, and I just want to say thank you." These weren't trolls or bots or orchestrated campaigns. They were people living with the consequences of those silent cuts, and Jasmine read every single one of them. She sat on the floor of her small apartment that night, back against the couch, the glow of her laptop lighting up her tired eyes, and scrolled through the stories. She didn't reply to all of them. She couldn't, but she read them. And for every story, she whispered, "I see you." Meanwhile, at the Office of Management and Budget, the tension was suffocating. Roland's inbox was flooded with internal emails, marked urgent, flagged by legal teams, flagged by PR teams, flagged by oversight. Questions like, "Did you sign off on these reallocations? Were you aware of the potential media impact? Do we have a justification package prepared for congressional hearings?" His assistant hovered in the doorway, clutching a stack of folders, eyes wide, as if waiting for orders he couldn't give. Roland sat there, the hum of the overhead lights filling the silence, staring at the screen where #Invisible Cuts was trending. He rubbed his temples, closed his eyes, and for the first time, truly saw the name on those lines in the documents, his own. 3 days later, Jasmine was scheduled to testify before a House Oversight Subcommittee. No cameras, just a closed-door briefing. She didn't rehearse a speech. She didn't write a fiery monologue. She printed out 5 sheets: the spreadsheet, the signature page, the coded email, the quarter-by-quarter reductions, and the list of 47,000 families affected. She packed them into a plain folder. She put on her simple blue blazer, tied back her hair, and took a deep breath. And she walked into that room, the folder tucked under her arm, feeling the weight of every message she had read over the past 3 days. The stories from Ohio, from Texas, from Michigan, from everywhere. The stories that weren't just stories anymore, but proof. Evidence of what happens when a system quietly decides that certain people don't matter enough to be counted, to be seen, to be heard. She nodded to the clerk who opened the door, offering a quiet, "Thank you," as she stepped into the hearing room. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly. A long table, water pitchers, stacks of binders, a few staffers setting up laptops. No cameras, no reporters, just the heavy stillness of a room where decisions are made. Roland was already seated, a legal advisor on each side of him, both flipping through binders, highlighting passages, whispering to each other with the kind of urgent calm people use when they know they're about to be asked questions they don't want to answer. Jasmine took her seat across from them, laying her folder down on the table, resting her hands on top of it. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The committee chair, a man in his early 60s with gray hair and a tired but kind face, cleared his throat. "Congresswoman Crockett, thank you for coming in today." Jasmine nodded. "Thank you for having me." The chair looked over at Roland, who was trying to keep his expression neutral, but the tightness in his jaw was giving him away. "We're here today," the chair continued, "to review your findings and to understand how nearly $800 million in disability assistance funds were redirected without congressional oversight." There it was, out loud, in the room, not hidden in a spreadsheet, not buried in coded language, spoken. Roland shifted in his seat. The chair gestured to Jasmine. "Congresswoman, you may proceed." She opened her folder, carefully pulling out the 5 sheets she had prepared. She placed them in front of her, aligning the edges, taking a breath. Then she looked up. "This isn't about me," she said, her voice calm, steady. "It's about the 47,000 families who lost the support they were promised. It's about the veterans who were told to wait for care that never came. It's about the children who stopped receiving therapy because someone, somewhere, decided they weren't worth the line item anymore." She picked up the first sheet, the spreadsheet she had projected on the wall that day. This document shows a 5-year pattern of reductions in the Disability Assistance Direct Grant Program, from $1.25 billion to $440 million quarter by quarter, adjustment by adjustment. She set it down. She picked up the second sheet, the one with Rollins' signature. This shows the authorization of a $124 million reduction signed by Mr. Rollin. She set it down. She picked up the third sheet, the coded email. This email shows the internal instruction to shift funds quietly, use indirect code, avoid triggering thresholds, forwarded by Mr. Rollin. She set it down. She picked up the fourth sheet, the list of reductions, line by line, each marked adjustment entry. This is a record of the reductions, each one marked with vague codes like administrative realignment and operational efficiency adjustment, with no public explanation. She set it down. She picked up the final sheet, the list of 47,000 families. "And this," she said, pausing, letting the weight of the page rest in her hands, "is a list of the people who were affected." She looked up, meeting Rollins' eyes for the first time. They weren't numbers to them. They were promises. The room was quiet. Rollins' legal advisors were scribbling notes, flipping through binders, whispering strategies, but Rollin himself just sat there, eyes on the papers in front of him, jaw clenched, throat working as he swallowed. The committee chair leaned forward. "Mr. Rollin, do you have a response?" Rollin cleared his throat, adjusting his tie, shifting in his seat. "Chairman, these adjustments were standard procedure. The budget is a living document, and reallocation is part of maintaining administrative efficiency." Jasmine didn't flinch. "Efficiency," she repeated softly. The chair held up a hand. "Mr. Rollin, the Congresswoman's evidence suggests that these reallocations were made using indirect coding to avoid oversight. Is that accurate?" Rollin's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced at his legal team, who gave him a subtle nod, as if to say, "Answer carefully." He exhaled, looking back at the chair. "Yes," he said, voice tight, "but that is within the bounds of administrative discretion." Jasmine raised her eyebrows, tilting her head slightly. "Discretion," she repeated. Rollin looked down, his fingers drumming lightly against the table. The chair spoke again. "Mr. Rollin, did you consider the impact these reallocations would have on the families relying on these funds?" Silence. A long, heavy silence. Jasmine could see it the moment it clicked for him. That these weren't just numbers, weren't just adjustments on a screen, weren't just efficiency improvements. They were people. And for the first time, Rollin's mask slipped. I didn't see the names," he said quietly. Jasmine leaned forward, voice calm, steady, but firm. "They saw yours." After the hearing, Jasmine stepped out into the hallway, the heavy wooden door closing behind her with a soft click. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Outside, her aide was waiting, holding her phone, notifications still buzzing. "You're trending again," the aide said, a small, tired smile on her face. Jasmine nodded, taking the phone, glancing at the screen. Jasmine saw the line, hashed invisible cuts. Accountability. It wasn't about going viral. It wasn't about the numbers on the screen. It was about the mother in Ohio, the veteran in Texas, the caseworker in Michigan, the father in the back row standing up and saying, "My daughter lost her therapy." It was about making sure they were seen. Over the next few weeks, congressional offices were flooded with calls, not angry rants, not scripted campaigns, real people. People calling to ask, "Is my family on that list?" People asking, "Will the funding come back?" People saying, "Thank you for seeing us." Meanwhile, investigative reporters picked up the trail. They started digging into the budget logs, finding similar adjustment entries in other programs. Veteran services, early childhood intervention programs, nutrition assistance, each one a quiet reduction, each one hidden behind coded language, each one signed. And suddenly, what had been hidden was now in the light. Jasmine sat in her office late that night, the lights low, the hum of the city outside the only sound breaking the silence. Her phone was face down on the desk, still vibrating occasionally with notifications she was ignoring for now. She had a cup of cold coffee by her elbow and the folder of documents open in front of her, even though she didn't need to read them again. She knew every line by heart now, every number, every date, every code. She wasn't tired. She was awake in a way that felt deeper than caffeine, deeper than adrenaline. Awake because she knew that this was just the start. There was a soft knock on her door before it opened. Her aide stepped in, holding a stack of printouts. "These are the requests we've received in the last 6 hours," the aide said, setting them down. Families asking for case reviews, journalists requesting statements, a few nonprofits offering pro bono legal help to anyone who wants to challenge the cuts. Jasmine nodded, flipping through the pages, seeing the names, not numbers. She closed the folder, resting her hands on top of it, looking up at her aide. "I want to call some of them," she said. The aide hesitated. "Now?" Jasmine looked at the clock. It was past midnight. "Yes," she said. "Now." They spent the next 2 hours calling the numbers on the list. Jasmine spoke softly, introducing herself, listening as people told her their stories. A mother whose child's therapy sessions stopped without explanation. A veteran who had lost in-home care. A grandmother raising a disabled grandson, trying to stretch every dollar after the checks stopped coming. Sometimes the people on the other end cried. Sometimes they were quiet. Sometimes they just said, "Thank you for seeing us." And Jasmine would respond the same way, every time. "I see you. I'm not going to stop." When they hung up the last call, her aide was blinking back tears. "You can't fix all of it," the aide whispered. Jasmine looked at her, tired but certain. "I know," she said, "but we can start." The next morning, a hearing was scheduled with the full oversight committee. Roland was there again, seated at the table, his legal team by his side, folders stacked in front of him. But something was different. He looked older, somehow, in just a few days, like the weight of what had been hidden was finally catching up to him. The room was quiet as Jasmine walked in, taking her seat across from him. She set down her folder, folded her hands, and looked directly at him. The chair opened the meeting with formalities, calling the session to order, listing the agenda. Then Jasmine was given the floor. She didn't stand. She didn't raise her voice. She just opened her folder and pulled out the same 5 sheets. "This is not a debate," she said, her voice calm. "This is an accounting." She placed the spreadsheet in front of her. "This is what was taken." She placed the signature page. "This is who signed it." She placed the email. "This is how it was hidden." She placed the list of reductions. "This is how it happened." She placed the list of names. "And these are the people it hurt." She looked up, meeting Roland's eyes. "You said you didn't see the names," she said quietly. "Now you do." Roland's lips parted like he was going to speak, but no words came out. He closed his mouth, looking down, his hands tightening around the edge of the table. A member of the committee cleared his throat, shifting in his seat, uncomfortable. "We need to understand the process that led to these reallocations," the member said, his voice careful, measured. "We need to understand how this could happen without congressional oversight." Jasmine didn't look away from Roland. "You don't need a process to hide a cut," she said softly. "You just need someone willing to sign the paper and not ask questions." Across the country, the conversation was shifting. On morning shows, anchors read excerpts from the documents Jasmine had presented. In living rooms, families who had been told, "Try again next year," were realizing that the denial wasn't random, wasn't an accident, wasn't just bad luck. It was signed. On social media, people were posting under invisible cuts, sharing how their services had disappeared. A father posting a photo of his son's empty therapy room, writing, "They said there was no money. There was. They just took it." A disabled veteran posting, They told me to wait. Now I know why I was waiting. No screaming, no chaos, just quiet truth. And that truth was louder than any shouting ever could be. Roland was called to testify again 2 days later. This time the room was fuller. More committee members, more staffers, more eyes watching. He came in wearing the same gray suit, but there was a heaviness to the way he carried himself now. He took his seat, cleared his throat, adjusted the microphone. "Mr. Roland," the committee chair began, "do you have a statement before we proceed?" Roland paused, looking down at the papers in front of him. Then he looked up, meeting Jasmine's eyes across the table. "I didn't see the people," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I saw the numbers. I saw the directives. I saw the codes." He swallowed, blinking quickly. "I didn't see the people." The room was quiet. Jasmine didn't say anything. She just nodded once, acknowledging the truth in his words. In the days that followed, the Office of Management and Budget announced a review of every reallocation made in the past 10 years. A bipartisan group of lawmakers called for the restoration of funds to the Disability Assistance Direct Grant Program, demanding accountability for the $793 million that had been quietly siphoned away. Families began receiving calls from state offices, telling them their cases were being reevaluated. It wasn't a complete fix. It wasn't instant, but it was a start. Late one evening, Jasmine sat on the steps outside the Capitol, the lights of the city glowing in the distance, the air cool against her skin. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages she hadn't had a chance to read during the day. One caught her eye. It was from the mother in Ohio she had spoken to that first night. The message was simple. "My son's therapy is being reinstated. They called today. Thank you." Jasmine closed her eyes, letting the moment settle around her. She wasn't naive enough to think the fight was over. There would be more hearings, more documents, more resistance. But in that moment, sitting on the cold stone steps, she allowed herself to feel the smallest spark of hope. Because it wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the people. And for once, they were being seen. She stood up, pocketing her phone, looking back at the Capitol building, its columns bright against the dark sky. And she made herself a promise. No matter how many doors she had to walk through, no matter how many spreadsheets she had to read, no matter how many signatures she had to call out, she wouldn't stop, because someone had to see the line, and someone had to make it visible. The next morning, Jasmine walked into her office before sunrise. The city was still quiet, the sky turning a soft blue as dawn approached. She placed her coffee on her desk, opened her laptop, and began reading the emails that had come in overnight. They were from families, caseworkers, veterans, teachers, nonprofit advocates. They were from people who had spent years being told there was nothing left, that there was no budget, that it was just the system. Now, they were realizing it wasn't the system. It was signatures. It was choices. And Jasmine read every line of every message, letting the stories settle into her bones, letting the weight of them remind her why she couldn't stop now. Later that morning, she met with her staff. They gathered around the conference table, coffee cups in hand, laptops open, the whiteboard already filled with notes from the previous day. "All right," Jasmine said, looking around the room. "What's next?" Her aide, eyes tired but focused, spoke first. "We have 117 families who've asked for help with reopening their cases. We have 3 states that are starting audits of their disability assistance programs. And we have a list of other programs that have similar adjustment entry patterns." Jasmine nodded. "Let's prioritize the families first. Then we move to the other programs." Another staffer raised a hand. "What about the media requests?" Jasmine paused, taking a sip of her coffee before responding. "Let's give them the documents," she said. "All of them." The room was quiet for a moment. "You sure?" her aide asked. "Yes," Jasmine said. "This isn't about us. It's about the truth." That afternoon, a journalist from a major outlet published a detailed report using the documents Jasmine had provided. They broke down the numbers, they showed the signatures, they explained the codes, administrative realignment, operational efficiency adjustment, budget optimization. They highlighted the total, $793 million. They included interviews with families whose lives had been affected, parents holding their children in their arms, veterans in wheelchairs talking about the care they had lost, social workers describing the desperation they saw every day. The article ended with a photo of the spreadsheet Jasmine had projected onto the wall, the red circles around the numbers, the caption beneath it. $793 million. No oversight, no voice. The reaction was immediate. Phones rang in congressional offices. Emails flooded inboxes. People who had never paid attention to budget hearings were suddenly asking questions. How could this happen? Who allowed this? Can it be fixed? The quiet truth was doing what no speech ever could. It was forcing people to look. Meanwhile, Jasmine was called to testify again, this time in front of a joint committee. The hearing room was larger, filled with lawmakers from both parties, staffers lining the walls, journalists sitting in the back with notebooks ready. Jasmine walked in, calm, carrying the same folder she had carried into every meeting. She sat down, placed the folder in front of her, and looked up as the chair called the meeting to order. We are here today to continue our examination of the reallocation of nearly $800 million in disability assistance funds, the chair said, his voice echoing in the chamber. Congresswoman Crockett, you have the floor. Jasmine opened her folder, pulling out the 5 sheets she had shown before. She didn't need to explain them again. Everyone in the room knew what they were. Instead, she spoke quietly, letting the silence in the room fill the spaces between her words. This isn't just about budget codes, she said. This is about people. She paused, letting her eyes move across the committee members, making sure they were listening. It's about children who stopped getting therapy, about veterans who lost care, about families who were told there was no money when the money was there all along, quietly moved on someone's signature. She lifted the email, holding it up. This isn't a system failure, she said. This is a choice. Roland was called forward again. He looked tired, older than he had just weeks before, the weight of what he had signed finally visible on his face. He sat down, adjusted the microphone, and spoke softly. I didn't understand the impact, he said. I didn't see the people. His voice broke for a moment. I see them now. There was silence in the room. No one interrupted. No one deflected. They just listened. After the hearing, Jasmine stepped outside into the crisp air, the sky clear, the sun warm on her face. Her phone buzzed, another message coming in. It was from a caseworker in a small town in Kentucky. We just got word that funding for therapy sessions is being restored. Parents are calling us, crying, thanking us. Thank you for fighting for them. Jasmine closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel it. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was progress. And for now, that was enough. As weeks passed, the conversations continued. Budgets were reviewed, audits were launched. Funds began to return to the programs where they were needed most. And people began to believe, maybe for the first time in a long time, that their voices mattered. Jasmine kept working, meeting with families, reviewing cases, testifying when she needed to. She knew it wouldn't be easy. She knew there would be pushback, resistance, and bureaucracy, trying to hide behind paperwork again. But she also knew one undeniable truth. Once people see the line, they can't unsee it. Once they know the truth, they don't forget it. Once they realize that they were never supposed to find out, they don't stop asking questions. And that was how change started. Not with shouting, not with viral hashtags, although they helped, but with quiet truth, laid bare for everyone to see. One night, Jasmine walked through her neighborhood, the air cool, the streetlights glowing. She passed houses where families were eating dinner, kids laughing inside, the smell of home-cooked meals drifting through open windows. She thought of the families she had spoken to, the ones who had waited for help that never came, who had been told to try again next year, who had believed that was the end of the story. It wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. She reached her front door, unlocked it, and stepped inside. She placed her keys on the table, hung up her coat, and sat down at her kitchen table with a cup of tea. She opened her laptop, the glow lighting up her tired but determined face, and she started working on the next list. Because there were more lines to find, more signatures to uncover, more people to see. and she wasn't going to stop. Because the truth is, the fight for accountability doesn't end when the documents are shown. It doesn't end when someone says, "I didn't see the people." It doesn't end when the funds start coming back. It ends when the system is rebuilt so that no one has to wait years for help they should have had all along. It ends when families don't have to fight for what they were promised. It ends when the signatures on the documents match the promises made. And until that day came, Jasmine would keep going. Outside, the city was alive, lights twinkling in the distance, cars passing on the street below, people living their lives, many of them never knowing how close they had come to losing what they needed. And Jasmine sat there, a quiet resolve in her heart, the hum of the city around her, because she had seen the line, and now the world had too.